Good day, college students. So welcome to our Business Communication Module 1, Week 1, Communication Fundamentals. I hope that you are all doing fine and you are ready for our lesson for today. So to start with, let me read to you our intended learning outcomes. At the end of the lesson, the students will be able to define communication. Second, enumerate the nature of communication and illustrate the different models of communication. Are you all set? Let's start. One of the ways we use communication is to express the procedure or task of using words, sounds, pictures, or behaviors to express and share information. Now let me read to you the definition of communication. According to Webster's dictionary, communication is a process by which information is exchanged between individuals through a common system of symbols, signs, or behavior. Now, what are these system of symbols? These are the written words or the written symbols that we are using especially when we are writing. Now, how about this signs or behavior? Now, this refers to the different actions, our characters, and how we deal with other people. And that is communication already. Now, as you can see in the picture, the teacher is communicating to her students, and vice versa, the students are also communicating to their teacher. Now, we could really see that communication is a process of sharing and conveying messages or information from one person to another using different means. Medium meaning to say, what are your language? Are you using English? Are you using Bisaya, Filipino, or other language that you know? Another thing we also have here, context, media, and cultures. Because when we say communication, from culture to culture, it will really have a difference, and we will have to discuss that one to our next lessons. In your personal life, in school, in the community, and in your workplace, for those who are already working, take note that effective communication is vital for success. Okay? It is very important, class. Why? Especially as a student, you have to be skillful enough to communicate your ideas to your instructors, especially that right now you are already college students. And because you are already college students, many instructors and professors have a higher, they have a higher expectation when it comes to your communication skills. Therefore, as a student, you are expected to communicate well compared to your high school years. Next thing, you also need to know how to communicate well in your workplace. I know that many here are already working. You need to know how to communicate, show respect towards your co-workers and towards your employers. And that is an example why communication is really important for success. Since you are faced with people of varied beliefs, values, attitudes, and backgrounds, communication principles really have to do with that. In real-world scenarios, you need to engage in group discussions, right? You also need to make presentation and interact with different people. If you don't have a good communication skills, then you will have a hard time relating with others. especially for those students who are very shy, it would be really hard for you to express your ideas. For example, you have an idea, but since you are not that confident enough because you don't know how to communicate your ideas, then it would be very hard for you to express your idea, to share your idea towards your classmates. Okay? Now, in this subject, you will really learn how to communicate well with your classmates, especially right now that you will have to use your technology. We will be using technology for us to be able to communicate, and that is the reason why in our rules we have stated that we should know how to use the different punctuations, because different punctuations will really give different meanings to how we send our messages, and that would be very helpful for you to be able to become a good, effective communicator. Now, let's proceed to the different ways of communication. Number 1, we have face-to-face. Okay, next we have here, we also have a phone conversation. We also have group discussion. Number 5, class recitation. Okay. Communication skills are tied to academic skills. Students who are good at writing and speaking perform better not only in the English classroom but also in the content areas and all other areas of learning. That is the reason why we say that communication is integrated in all parts of our lives. Sometimes we say that communication is only important, especially when it comes to English subjects. But that is not true. Communication is indeed tied to different academic skills. It is a mistake to believe that communication is a simple process. Now let me read to you that according to James Humes, the art of communication is the language of leadership. Now, as what I have stated a while ago, that communication is really not that simple. It's not a simple process. Although people communicate with one another every day, the real question is whether the ideas one has expressed are truly understood by another. Sometimes we tend to wonder why a particular friend of ours are mad at us. It's because maybe when there are times when we say something to them, for us it's just a joke, but then to them they are already hurt. That is the reason why before we utter words, we need to think if the words that we convey towards others are helpful, or they are kind, or those are the things that you really wanted to say. Okay, next, let's discuss about the nature of communication. Okay, we have here, number 1, communication is a process. Number 2, communication is much more of an art than a science. Third, communication has a sender and a receiver. Number 4, communication is verbal or non-verbal. Now let's try to discuss the meaning of those statements. Let's start with number 1. Communication is a process. What do you think is the reason why communication is a process? Number 1, it is because communication is a step-by-step activity. Okay? Meaning to say, it is a process by means you have to essentially involve a receiver and a speaker, a sender. Okay? Second, it is a two-way process that involves the active participation of both the sender and receiver. Meaning to say, if the receiver of the message does not really pay attention to the sender, then there is a big chance that the idea cannot be understood by the receiver. That is the reason why when we talk to someone or when we intend to listen, we have to pay attention to the speaker. Okay? Next, it is a dynamic process. Why dynamic process? It is because communication is the act or process of using words, sounds, signs, or behaviors to exchange information or to express your ideas and feelings to someone else, and that would be your listener. That would be your receiver. Remember that when we say communication as a dynamic process, it is the communicator's mood and thinking. It is a complex process. It's not that simple as what I've stated a while ago. Why? Because one message may be interpreted in many ways by different people. Right? Sometimes when we say something, for us, that's okay. That's fine. That has no meaning. But for others, the way you roll your eyes, meaning to say they call you that you're maarte, right? Even if you're not. The way how you behave, that is already another way of communicating yourself towards others. The way how you project yourself, the way how you speak, the way you utter words, your choice of words, your expressions, that is a way of communicating yourself, your personality towards other people. And that is a very important nature of communication. Okay? Now let's proceed to number 2. It's been stated here that communication is much more of an art than a science. Why? Yes, why? Why do you think so? According to this, let's read. There is no right or wrong way to communicate. Yes, we don't have to follow rules. When we are young, we know how to, when we are still babies, we know how to communicate with our parents. How? How do we communicate to them? By means of crying. Meaning to say, when you are crying as a baby, meaning to say you need something. It might mean that you are hungry. It might mean that you are not feeling well. And do you think the baby has to follow rules just to communicate? The answer would be no. Therefore, communication has no right or wrong way to communicate. But for professionals, for students, if you really want to be effective communicator, that is the reason why we have to follow ways on how we communicate. Next, what have you seen in the picture? Someone is speaking, while in the other picture, someone is listening. Okay? Now, communication has a sender and a receiver. Who do you think is the sender? The sender of the message is the speaker, while the listener or the receiver, that is receiver, is the listener. Okay, very good. Now let's proceed to number 4. Communication is verbal or non-verbal. I repeat, communication is verbal or non-verbal. Communication can be expressed through written or spoken words, and that is verbal. While there are also communication by means of actions, and that is an example of non-verbal. Now, communication is not all about sending or receiving facts in words. It does involve ideas and emotions that are expressed through signs, symbols, and gestures. What are the signs? What are these symbols? And what are these gestures? Gestures meaning to say how you act, when you are speaking, diba? When we are speaking, sometimes we tend to move our hands, and that has a meaning. The way how we speak to others, that are gestures. Okay? Sometimes when we are angry, our facial expression might change, right? Especially when we are angry. When we are happy, we are smiling, and that is an example of gestures. Those are example of actions, diba? Are you familiar with the saying that goes, action speaks louder than words? It is because even actions could really send messages to other people. Now, let's proceed to number 5. Okay, communication is inevitable. In our language, what do we mean by inevitable? Inevitable means dili malikayan. Okay? It means that you cannot avoid communicating. Dili malikayan. You cannot really avoid communicating. Remember, when we say communication, this does not want to communicate. When someone doesn't want to communicate, can you do that? Diba? When we say, I don't want to talk to other people, and you tend to stay in your room the whole day if you don't want to eat, but the people around you could sense that you are not okay, right? And that is communication. Sometimes it simply means that you cannot avoid communicating. Why? The truth is, we are communicating constantly, always we are communicating. And even when you do not want to communicate, you are communicating. Sometimes when you have an argument with your girlfriend or with your boyfriend, you tend not to text them, you tend to ignore their calls, their messages, but that is already a communication, a way of communication. You are sending a message to your partner that he has done something wrong, or it means that you're not okay, there is something wrong, and that is communication. It is really inevitable. Okay? This notion tells us that communication is everywhere. Thus, it is impossible to not communicate. Okay? When you see the dark clouds, the deep blue sea, the howling dogs, your empty room, your empty pocket, it means something, right? And that is really how communication works. Let's proceed to number 6. Communication is irreversible. Okay? This means that what you have said can never be unsaid. Dili na mabalik. Okay? Irreversibility happens the very minute you click the OK button for a comment on a post on your social media, and that it would be too late to take it back, right? Because especially if you have already posted that one, then other people might read it. Even if you unsend it, if other people have already read it, then you cannot really reverse the time. Okay? The same thing when you perhaps throw a hurting or offensive words to your friend. Can you reverse that one? No. Can you reverse the feeling that your friend has felt? No. What you have said can never be unsaid. Okay? Before saying them, you can later be sorry for what you have said. But once the damage has already been done, then it cannot be undone. Okay? Always remember that when you have something to say, especially when you are in the point in your life when you're very angry, you tend to say hurtful words. Hurtful words where you can never unsaid it. And that might hurt that person. So think before you speak. think before you click. You really have to think because communication is irreversible. Dili na siya mabalik. Now let's proceed to the 7th one. Communication is unrepeatable. Unrepeatably means that an act of communication can never be duplicated. We may say the same thing over and over again, but the effect of what you said the second or third or fourth time will not be the same as the first time you said it. Even if we intend to say the same thing again, which is possible, but the idea here is the outer world has changed the second utterance. Okay? The listeners may be different. Our mood may be different. But sometimes when we say something, the same thing, we say good morning. It can be communicated. They are the same words, but it can be communicated differently. Right? When you say good morning and you are smiling, it would really project a positive image of yours. But when you say just good morning, then it would send a different message. Okay? It can never be duplicated. Even if you say the same words, it's never the same. So I hope that you learned from our discussion for today. And I am really anticipating that you could really answer our test for today. Are you ready? I guess you are. So let's have our first activity. So our first activity is true or false. So very simple. When the statement is true, then you'll have to write in your notes true. But if the statement is false, then you'll have to write false. Remember to follow the instructions correctly. Number 1. Communication is a process. Is it true or false? Take your time. Second, the sender decodes the message to be transmitted. Is it true or false? Third, channel is a medium of communication. Fourth, talking to the self can develop one's confidence. Next, number 5. The receiver interprets the message received. True or false? Done? Let's proceed to next number. Number 6. Communication can either be written or spoken words. Number 7. The receiver is the source of the message. Is it true or false? Number 8. Man cannot survive without communication. Number 9. Communication is a one-way process. Number 10. For our last number, to seek clarification, channel is needed. Are you done? I hope that you learned from our discussion for today. Now, please answer this question and write your answer on the comment box below. Please don't forget to write your answer on the comment box below. Now let me read the question. How does communication play an important role in your daily lives? You need to answer that question correctly. I hope that you learned from our discussion. See you in my next lesson. Bye!